Good morning. It is like 11 in the morning, which is early enough for me on a Saturday. Before I get on to filming this video about how much I hate the American education system, I'd rather do it somewhere prettier and nicer despite it being like 30 degrees outside. So we're gonna hop on the bikes, head out to a nice trail, set up a shot, and I will begin rambling about how much I hate things. See you there! The phrase standardized tests elicits a response of both disgust and hatred in students and teachers alike. Generally speaking, in the American education system, no one likes standardized tests. No one likes standardization in general. Standardized tests are a same-shape metric attempting to measure differently shaped people. Okay, so why am I so angry about standardized tests and why should you care? Well, for one, I teach high school science. I'm a teacher. I was also a student for 12 years. I went to college and I've taken plenty of standardized tests myself. Back to the original point. Standardized tests suck. Why? Well, not everyone learns the same. Ask any parent of a child with a learning disability, or someone like me, a teacher who has multiple learning disabilities, and we'll all collectively tell you that a multiple choice test does not capture what we know. In my mind, everyone is a genius. There's geniuses everywhere. They just don't show what they know in the same way. And so we know standardized tests suck. And that's enough on that rant. The thing I'm worried about, and I want to make an argument to you about, is the next step. The next step of standardized tests is something called standardized teaching. And the sort of buzzword used to describe it in school districts right now is something called canned curricula. Canned curricula is essentially a series of lessons, PowerPoints, materials, videos, and assessments that is used by a given district or group of teachers that is all the exact same for all the students within a given learning discipline. I think you can see how this is a problem in the same way that standardized tests are. Now, in some ways, I think this is great. There are a couple of parties here that really benefit from using canned curricula, and I want to address that before I absolutely dunk on it for 10 straight minutes. First up is teachers. When a teacher doesn't have to spend 5, 6, 7 of their hours a week planning lessons ahead, they have more time to focus on classroom management. There are a lot of districts, especially impoverished ones, where students are having more behavior problems because they have fewer resources at home, where the schools opt to use canned curricula, because the teachers can focus more on managing their classrooms and less on designing curriculum. Furthermore, parents kind of love this. When it comes to having a student in a given school, you can guarantee that no matter what teacher that kid gets, they're going to have the same learning experience. But the problem is, as I've said, not every kid is the same. So two parties can benefit from this. Teachers can benefit and save time, and parents can benefit by knowing their kids getting equality. But the thing is, there's more than one word that starts with E that matters. We've covered equality. Every kid gets the same. But what about equity? Not every kid is the same. So let's recap. Parents, teachers, and taxpayers all benefit when you standardize how teachers teach. But the problem is, and I want you to think about this, which important group of people, which maybe central motivating group of people, maybe the purpose for education itself, which group of people have I not mentioned benefits? We'll come back to that. Let's go deeper into this and really understand why standardization is a trend in education right now and why I'm so against it. And honestly, before I even really get into the history of how we got to this point where we want to make sure every single student gets the exact same experience in a classroom, despite them all being plainly different, I just want to address that this is a persuasive piece. This is my opinion. It functionally is, and I am here to kind of try and persuade you away from voting in school districts for canned curricula or supporting a district that's using something like that, as opposed to dedicating time for teachers to design learning experiences that meet the needs of all of their kids instead of just slathering a blatant equilateral sticker over everyone and saying hopefully that's good enough. My argument is kind of simple. If everyone you know collectively hates something, it is probably bad. Rat poison, people just kind of don't like it. Why? It's just objectively bad. Being killed, bad. No one likes it. Murder, bad.
28 samples.
Everyone collectively hates it. I don't know a single person who's like, oh boy, I love standardized tests. I would definitely take this over a unique college entrance exam. No one says that. In total, the most positive I've ever seen from standardized tests is increasing the stratification of students and becoming even more hierarchical, where a kid can say, I got this number, so I'm great, and you got that number, so you're this. That's completely stupid. Now, while I do think it is pretty persuasive that everyone I know and probably you know hates standardized tests, and so I think they'll not like standardized teaching, while that's very persuasive, that doesn't explain how we got here. Why am I having to whine about it in the first place? Why is this something that's going on and being broadly accepted across America? Why is everyone speaking so quietly about it? And why am I going to say it so loudly? Well, to understand how we got here, we have to understand where we started. I think this story really starts back in 1965 with the creation of what is now called the ESEA, or Elementary and Secondary Education Act. The ESEA represented a shift in American education towards a more standards-based approach for looking at how students in America are doing, a way of actually gathering data on kids. This acted a lot more than just establishing a need for having data on kids, and eventually it was revised into the NCLB, or No Child Left Behind. I guess they dropped the A for act this time. In the NCLB, which was established in the early 2000s, this shifted to having schools use a performance-based metric of measuring teacher effectiveness. Essentially, the idea was your school's funding was determined on how well you were able to improve your test scores year over year. Finally, with the ESSA Act, or Every Student Succeed Act, the NCLB was rewritten a little bit into something that puts the responsibility of accountability away from the federal government and down to individual states within the U.S. And in all fairness, these acts all were made with the intent to make American education better. And they've been amended several times at this point, and yet they've maintained the same general perspective. Their goal was to use the same tests for different students. And that is my problem. So the shift over time from the mid-1960s has been a move towards an American education system that is fueled on testing. It's fueled on standardization. And I'm not talking, in my opinion, about using standards to determine our content. I talked about that before. What to teach is fine. How I teach and how it's assessed can be a big problem because not every kid is the same. I just want to provide some context, though, historically, as I've already been doing. When did this all begin? 1965, during the height of the Cold War. What is the uniting theme for all of these acts and their purpose? Okay, well, it's to gather data on kids to know if they're doing well. Okay, what are you going to do with that data? Punish or reward schools and teachers? Oh, so you want to make it a competition? In the 1960s, during the Cold War, America's largest dick measuring contest? Oh, okay, wait a minute. This all makes sense. America's movement towards this stupid testing-based system is all just associated with the fact that the U.S. wants to stand out as the best country in the world. And the irony is that this very same venom for these other countries to make us more competitive, or the venom that we're using to make our states more competitive, the venom we're using to let our teachers be more competitive, is a poison to ourselves, because the people who end up hurting are the kids. All right, listen, I'm going to level with you. High expectations for teachers and students in an education system is not necessarily a wrong thing. The problem is where you measure those expectations based off of. Are you looking at projects a student has put together across an entire semester, a portfolio of art pieces in some sort of AP art class? Are you looking at a critical essay that a kid wrote over weeks of time at the end of a semester? if you're going to use a single multiple choice test to get a feeling for how the average kid is doing, that kid doesn't exist. That's one of my favorite personal beliefs, is that average is a social construct. There is no average kid. There is no one kid who's going to work with a multiple choice test with its short little essay in the end the exact same as every other kid. That's why I don't like standardization. And another thing, and I'll get more to canned curriculum in a moment, and another thing is the whole idea of competition in the American education system. Why the hell would you think that makes sense? Something teachers have been told for like 20 or 30 years now is, hey, don't compare kids to each other. What that does is set a false expectation where you compare yourself to other students, and that's what motivates you. That's called extrinsic motivation. It's a shitty method of motivation. It's one that causes kids to demean themselves and lose their self-concept. Why would you use competition as a means for comparing kids or schools or teachers? We're taught in our classrooms that one of the best ways you can manage a class is by having high expectations for everyone themselves individually. Every kid in the room you have an expectation for. And the idea isn't to post the grades on the board and have them fight over it. That won't result in real learning. That results in competition. That results in cheating, in fakery, in inauthenticity, where kids just do the work instead of actually learning the thing we set out to do. I hate standardized tests. Imagine what could be worse. That's what I think is standardized curriculum. Canned curriculum. Like a can. All right, so canned curriculum, the thing that I'm like really actually pissed about. What is canned curriculum? Why am I so bothered by it? Why do I think you should be too? Well, to start, I think we should take a look at a case study. Okay, so this is an article from Education Week talking about a Hawaii school district that used canned curriculum and kind of got bit in the ass for it. So the title reads, "Complaints over offensive content lead schools to drop online learning provider." So for context, this is a Hawaii school a couple of years ago that was using a special program and set of canned curriculum to do their online school. I don't actually know what this online school was for. Was it just alternative enrollment? Was it for kids that were at risk of failure? I actually don't know that context in particular, but I know it was for their online kids, and so a lot of kids were still seeing this. To kind of summarize what went bad with this curriculum, I'll read just one paragraph from this article. Among the content prompting complaints from parents was an activity from a kindergarten social studies lesson in which children were asked a series of questions about families based on a pair of photos, one showing a black woman and child and the other showing a white man, woman, and child. A screenshot from the activity went viral. The image appeared to suggest that only one of the photos represented a family, leading the district superintendent to complain to Acelus, which is the online learning provider we're talking about. I'm actually not certain if I'm saying it correctly at all. But yeah, so like there was a picture of like a black mom and her kid, and it's like, that's not a family. And then there was a picture of like a nuclear white dad, and it's like, that's a family. What the... It's like so cursed. And listen, before I get deeper into the lore, which there's a lot of lore here, I'm not trying to say that canned curriculum is like some conspiratorial method for like social indoctrination or some shit like that. No. I just think that when you outsource your education, whether it be from a perspective of what is being taught or how it's being taught, the design can suck if you don't check it first or have professional educators be the ones working on it. Okay, let's go deeper into the lore here. What kind of worked out? This is a report, I think, from the office of the deputy superintendent for this district, and I just want to like point out a couple of things because I don't just want this to be like just like one straw man of an attack against canned curriculum. It wasn't just that the curriculum in this case was racist and sexist. It was also just kind of poorly designed and not aligned to the standards in general. So let me pull out a couple of good passages here. The concerns related to Acelus content conflicted with Board of Education policies addressing academic programs, standards, curriculum, discrimination, and religion. According to their policy, all elementary and secondary students shall offer a program of studies or curriculum that enables the students to attain to the highest degree possible. It's essentially saying, hey, our content and curriculum needs to get kids to the state level. And they found that while looking at the content in Aeschylus, at least 50% of the reviews conducted stated that they were not being well aligned to the Hawaii standards. Right? So they used canned curriculum, and it didn't even reflect what it was supposed to that they paid for. More on the, like, social aspect, the cursed social aspect of this, like, being covertly racist. Here is the specialist analysis recap regarding the Civil Rights Compliance Branch's review. Included findings for violations to protected classes in correlation with the Board of Education policy. This is all federal stuff, Title IX type things. It says here in this document, the following protected classes have been identified as being discriminated against in this curriculum: gender, national origin, race, physical appearance, religion, ethnicity, socioeconomic status. The discriminatory content of some of these lessons also violates the department's code of conduct, specifically the section that prohibits an employee, contractor, or volunteer from discriminating against or harassing anyone on the basis of any of their immutable characteristics. While the curriculum may be viewed as antiquated, this does not excuse the fact that it contains numerous discriminatory lessons and a showing of gender, cultural, and racial bias. This is literally just like the beginning of the lore too. Like, let's keep moving. What is Aeschylus Academy, this online canned curriculum that they were using for these kids? Well, here's Aeschylus Academy. If you go to its website, it says, why are 6,500 public schools using our courses? And by the way, I should note, not to be slanderous, that after this all happened and there was a bunch of media attention, Aeschylus, like, fixed all these things apparently, which is great, but I don't know how they got there in the first place. This is Aeschylus Academy. Apparently it's used by a lot of schools. It's an accredited institution, whatever the hell that means. This is their chairman. What is his name? His name is Roger Billings. Okay, Roger Billings. Roger Billings, if you look online, created his own sect of Mormonism, or the Church of the Latter-day Saints of Jesus Christ, and he made it, what was it called? It was called the Church of Jesus Christ in Zion. There it is. Okay. It's called the Church of Jesus Christ in Zion. And he's the owner of this. He was previously, from what I understand now, it's a defunct one, right? Yeah, it was disbanded in the early 2000s. He was the leader of a now defunct sect of Mormonism, in which the guy, the owner of Aeschylus, declared himself a prophet and patriarch of. And then you had all of this really racist, sexist, and religiously biased content in all of his curriculum. So that happened. Also, once again, I want to get back to that kind of important data. The Hawaii, this Department of Education still found that the curriculum, aside from not only being really weirdly biased, it also just didn't align itself well to the state standards. It wasn't even teaching kids in a racist way the right things in that racist way. So both the how and what of this canned curriculum was just absolute garbage. And I really want to lean into that. But okay, that's enough real life lore. Let me bring in some, like, primary sources. This is r/teachers. It's a subreddit on Reddit where people, especially teachers, talk about their experiences, pose questions to each other. And this is a pretty interesting post from a few years ago, several years ago. What are your thoughts on canned curriculum? This is a teacher who, like me, teaches science. Apparently this person also can teach geometry. That is much more impressive than me. I'll read the post here and go through a couple of the responses. I taught physics, astronomy, and geometry for 6 years and was completely free to develop my own curriculum for all three subjects. I was the only physics and astronomy teacher, and while I had colleagues who also taught geometry, there was no oversight or enforcement of common planning. I absolutely loved the freedom, but not having known any other way, I took it for granted. This year, I'm in a new school, and I was given a completely canned curriculum to teach. The only thing I was not given were assessments. And let me tell you, just breaking away for a second, a lot of canned curriculum demands similar assessments, and a lot of schools using common planning are requiring common assessments. So in some cases, not only will all the kids be learning the exact same way, they'll literally be tested the exact same way. And that's so productive for every kid, I'm certain. But the course is intended to be project-based learning, so assessments are meant to be more performance-based and less pencil and paper variety, which is dope and wonderful. I'm not saying that all of canned curriculum necessarily has to be bad. From what I've seen, the math teachers in my school are required to teach pre-packaged curricula that comes from the state as well. The major upside to CAN curriculum is the obvious. I don't have any lesson plans to create. The downside is that I don't feel as necessary anymore. My skill set, the creativity and dedication that drove me to create a complete high school astronomy curriculum and to adapt a modeling framework to geometry are now no longer necessary. If I wasn't somehow making more money, I would be really upset. So I'm curious, what are your experiences with CAN curriculum? How much freedom do you have? What do you like or dislike about your situation? Now, me, I should probably have noted, I think I did earlier, but I don't personally have a lot of experience with CAN curriculum. I have experience with Common Assessment and working with pre-made materials that I can then adapt to my own, and I love that dearly. I know I've been at the hands of CAN curriculum as a student several times, especially during my IEP days. I have a lot of personal experience with it as a student, but maybe not as a teacher. So my voice is not enough. I'm just anecdotal right now. Let's go to a couple more deep. Oh, I've read this before, by the way, and the first post does a really good job. I think for a new teacher, it can be helpful if there's wiggle room. Having a base for something can be extremely helpful, especially in your first couple of years. And I will admit, I am in my first year of teaching right now. And let me tell you, it's not hard. I don't know if that's a controversial thing to say. Teaching is easy. I have probably... In terms of materials, most of my materials were already made by the teachers that were there before me. That's probably why it's easy. I'm going to be honest, I'd take much harder. I would comfortably take much harder. In fact, in my teaching right now, in my first year of teaching, when it's supposed to be impossible to do anything, I make all of my own PowerPoints and all of my own guided notes, and I make a lot of the assessments tailored to my way, and I make a lot of the activities we do tailored to my way. I still do all of the work, and I don't even feel like I'm breaking a sweat. So, yeah, I'm certain it can be very helpful. I already feel like it's not very hard to begin with. This person continues, that being said, my biggest issue is a lack of creativity. Also, if something isn't working well, you typically don't have any room to adjust. Teaching some myself, I was stifled because I knew that what the students needed, but I felt at a loss as to how to make it happen. This is the entire point that I want to hit on. This is that quiet part I want to say loud. Standardized teaching, canned curriculum, common assessments. They don't give you room to adjust. And adjusting your content is one of the foundations of educational pedagogy. It's literally right there. Okay, I'm clearly getting heated and a bit personal. Let me keep making an appeal to other teachers' authority and experience. There's another response down here that just murders it. Canned curriculum is the worst thing to ever happen to the teaching profession. It completely devalues the teacher and their education. And on top of that, most of those lesson plans are poorly made, horribly written, and nearly impossible to follow in reality with a real group of kids. Because students don't follow scripts. The key to being an excellent teacher is the ability to improvise the lesson from class to class. This teacher says, I have never ever taught the same thing the same way to every class. Someone responds down here, wait, what? How does that even work? How do you differentiate? How do you do inclusion? How even does that work? That's where I'm at. And that's what I want to make loud and obvious to you, is that currently canned curriculum doesn't have its priorities straight. We'll get back to that again. It's coming at the end. All right, let's talk about another example. Let's be more specific. Let's talk about good old McGraw-Hill. And apparently something called StudySync. I don't know if StudySync, it seems to be its own independent online curriculum with lesson plans and a pacing guide. Whereas we all know McGraw-Hill is that giant education monopoly that owns every textbook ever, possibly. So this person wants to ask about McGraw-Hill and StudySync. What can I really do about it when I'm required to use these pre-made lessons? And has anyone used this curriculum successfully? And how do you make it more engaging? One of the big things it misses out on. When you don't have information about the particular kids you're teaching and you design a canned curriculum that fits within a box, guess what? It's going to be boring as hell. It's going to be boring as shit because it doesn't have anything to do with you, right? In my classroom, I know what kids are about. Canned curriculum just isn't engaging. It doesn't know anything about the kids it's being taught to, so the kids don't give a shit. The cool thing about what I get to do as a teacher is that I get to take every bit of concepts and ideas in science that I teach, and I get to tailor their presentation to my kids individually. And for me, that's part of why I love teaching. One of the main reasons I became a teacher is because I like people's stories. I like knowing everyone's different. I like knowing everyone's a person with their own life that is a beautiful and complex thing and yada yada. Either way, every kid is motivated by a different thing. Everyone has different likes and dislikes, things they love, things they hate, things they've experienced, things they don't want to. I can use my knowledge of my students to construct learning experiences that meet them where they are. Instead of putting them into another damn box, I can make my learning engaging. Okay, let's take a look at some of these comments. Our ELA teachers have to use their curriculum like this. I'll ask them what they do tonight. Oh, cool. So people are just helping out each other. Guys, these subreddits are awesome. You can just talk to each other about what you do. It's very good. This guy is referring you, hey, go talk to the people in your department. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. The original poster says, the other teachers are just as confused. A few of them seem to be adding in other stuff to make it work for them, but I've been told that we aren't allowed to do that. Talk to your department chair about this. Maybe have them mediate between you and your admin. You were new, so you should be getting more support. Okay, so that's kind of a game plan for this person. This person says, I have on-again, off-again feelings for StudySync. Use Blast to get students hooked in interest. You can use videos or initial things in your lessons to kind of make up for the fact that the rest of it is absolute dog shit. So that's something you could do. Okay. This person down here, I've read this one before, I think. They're angry. I think StudySync is a mindless program. I refuse to use canned and uninteresting curriculum. For seniors, I teach Beowulf and Dante's Inferno. I do not teach excerpts that mean nothing to students. I teach the entire works in depth. Then I teach Hamlet and Macbeth, entire works in depth. Then I teach No Exit. After that, it's Rita Hayworth and The Shawshank Redemption, and a unit on Alfred Hitchcock. My students are more informed by the end of the year, and I don't care about test scores. I care about the growth of my students, as students. This person is a vibe. I appreciate what they're saying. And I think there's an instructional argument to be made here. This person they said explicitly, I do not teach excerpts that mean nothing to the students. Once again, when the content tries to pick and choose or make things easier, or the curriculum is designed in such a way to only get the roots of things, it takes away a teacher's ability to tailor what they're teaching to those students. This teacher feels, whether validly or not, I don't know with English education, they feel it's more important to teach the entire work in context and to relate that to kids in a way that results in better learning, because this person says right at the end clearly, I care about their growth as students, not test scores. Okay, so that's some other teachers' perspective, but I want to give you mine. Formative assessment is a method for informing how teachers teach and plan and assess their kids that uses a cycle to help you constantly improve and constantly get your kids closer to success. It's kind of the foundation of how teachers teach right now. In standardized tests and standardized canned curriculum, both necessarily bastardize this process to the point of it no longer being able to function under those contexts. Let me explain it to you looking at each of these steps here. And this is a really simplified diagram. A lot of these have like 6 or 7 steps that are very specific. I just want to make it quick to the audience I'm working with. First part of the process for a teacher, ask yourself, where do I want my kids to be? How much do I want them to know? Then you're going to plan lessons based off of where you want them to get, right? You need to align those two. Finally, you're going to actually teach the lesson itself. And fourth, you're going to use evidence, whether it be data from your assessments or your experience walking around your own damn classroom. You're going to use that evidence to inform, how should I have done this differently, or how can I help the kids understand it better? That's what makes it formative. You constantly form your teaching around the needs of your kids. And guess what canned curriculum and standardized tests cannot do? They can't form or mold to the needs of your kids because they don't know them. Nobody wants their kid to just be another number. I don't want my students to just be another number that some sort of generalized assessment or method of teaching reaches out to. I want teachers to help my kids feel known, not just because I think they deserve it as people, but because I know they're going to learn better from it, and all the data in psychology shows that. But I want to move on just from talking about the formative assessment process and how everything contradicts it so plainly. Standardized assessments and canned curriculum just exist in opposition to one of the basic ways all teachers teach. I want to move on and talk about another way teachers teach, which is through something called alignment. It's called a lot of different things at different schools, but the idea is I have to align my teaching to the state standards, and then I have to align my kids' learning experiences to what I want them to learn from those state standards. It's technically called standards-based grading. Ironically, it's much better than just normal standardization. It's actually totally reasonable in my opinion. Let's take a look at it with some of my actual real teaching resources. I teach a unit always on cellular respiration in biology. I talk about photosynthesis and cellular respiration and the carbon cycle. And these are included in the state standards from where I used to teach back when I was teaching in Ohio. Each of the standards hits on a different point of this. It mentions emphasis is on illustrating inputs and outputs of matter and transfer and transformation of energy and photosynthesis by plants and other organisms. Okay, so one of the standards says, hey, the kids need to know how to use a model to show how photosynthesis works. The second standard says they need to show how cellular respiration works. The third standard is they need to develop a model to illustrate the role of these two in the carbon cycle. Okay, those are 3 standards for some topic in biology. The way that I construct my curriculum, and you'll quickly see how this is significantly better than using canned curriculum, is I start with the standards and then I work backwards. It's called backwards planning or backwards design. I start with my standards, and from those, I write here objectives. Objectives are what I want the kids to do in my own words. Then I take those objectives, and on the board every day, I write them down as a learning target, as an I can statement. So for example here, it says students would be able to recognize where in a cell the various photosynthetic processes take place. I would put on the board for my kids, hey guys, today I want you to be able to say, I can describe where photosynthesis takes place and how. Done. That would be the learning target more so. So I take the standards, which are all just science information and I think are all pretty valid in context of biology. I take the standard. From that, I build an objective. Then I use a learning target in the students' own words that help focus them on where they're trying to go. But there's an intermediary there. Kids don't just learn by listening to a teacher talk. They do activities and they do projects, and that's how I teach and how I assess my students. So let's look at one of my assessments and let me show you how it's aligned to the needs of my students in their own way. So here is my sealed terrarium project. The idea is the kids design on paper or digitally, they designed a terrarium that would hold one animal and one plant and show the movement of different chemicals through both of these chemical processes, photosynthesis and cellular respiration. In this actual assignment, there's a bunch of detail as to what to put where and how, and it's each aligned to the objectives and learning targets I made earlier. Towards the end, I also have a couple of written prompts because I don't feel I can actually capture all of their learning just with a couple of nice looking diagrams of a terrarium. So I have a couple of prompts that encourage kids to extend their understanding to a higher level. And at the end, I have a rubric, which everyone should be using. I use a rubric so the kids know exactly where they need to get, but most importantly, the rubric is aligned to the objectives I came up with. And the different parts of the assessment I designed are also aligned to that same set of objectives. But here's the interesting catch. This is not the only way that it has to be done. On the over here, I have a normal written test. I don't use this anymore, so feel free to give the answers out. This is a normal multiple choice, somewhat standard. Now, I think it's fully multiple choice. It's got a couple of extended responses. This is a normal multiple choice test that I made based off of the exact same objectives, and that I can demonstrably say assesses the kids on the exact same things as this crazy build your own terrarium project. But tell me, does every kid want to learn with this multiple choice test? And does every kid want to be assessed with this crazy drawing a terrarium thing? No, not every kid learns the same way, and not every kid can be assessed the same way to show what they know. As I said before, there's geniuses everywhere. They just don't show what they know in the same ways. So when I construct my teaching, I take into consideration what is interesting to my kids, and I take into consideration that not all of them learn the same. And when I taught this lesson, actually gave kids the option. I said, you can do the project or you can take a paper test. It's up to you. And guess what? They all did the project. Every single student. It's because tests suck, okay? Standardized tests, multiple choice tests, they all suck. And the kids know it too. In fact, if you're saying, well, the kids probably just found that project easier. It is easier because it's easier to show what you know using your hands. You've got opposable thumbs. Your brain has been engineered by natural selection for tens of thousands of years to be good at showing things by manipulating them and engaging with them with your senses, not circling a bubble. Am I getting overheated? Either way, this is how I teach. This is how I design my instruction to meet the individual needs of my students. Actually, a big part of my consideration for this was thinking about where I was teaching. At the time, I was teaching in rural Ohio, and guess what? Half of my kids lived on farms. So a terrarium where you get to raise a plant with an animal, that's just an analogy for agriculture. I knew it would be relevant to them. I knew it would be at least somewhat interesting to them. And I showed videos online to make it more interesting and engaging. This is what it means to mold your teaching to the needs of your students, and canned curriculum does not do that. Okay, so I've been ranting for probably 10 minutes now. I don't know, a long time. And I'd just like to wrap things up. I'm going to summarize real quick. This is like a reflection I do at the end of my lessons. Let's talk about what I've gone through, okay? I started this whole sort of video essay talking about standardized tests and how we all collectively agree that they suck. Then I've moved on to talking about canned curriculum and why it's following that same pattern of standardization in American education. Then I brought in case studies of that weird aceless program owned by the Mormon prophet who, what did he do? He injected racist and sexist under and overtones into his curriculum that was being used by a school district to replace having teachers design it themselves. Then I went on to Reddit. I showed you a couple of posts about how teachers all collectively are like, hey, it's not that good. Saves us time. Yeah, it kind of sucks, though. It never feels very good. Doesn't feel like it's being effective. Doesn't feel like it's meeting the needs of my kids. And then finally, I just spent the last, I don't know, fair bit of time whining about how I teach significantly better than everyone else and I'm the best teacher in existence. You know, because I am. That's sarcasm, by the way. I'm just trying to show and construct a really strong argument against standardization. We need to move away from this because the quiet part is that school districts right now that use canned curriculum and validate the usage of standardized tests by using performance metrics for their teachers, for example, districts, teachers, parents, any group of people that think this is working are placing the needs of students below their own. And that's the quiet part that no one's saying loudly. When a school uses canned curriculum, it wants to save its teachers time. It wants to make its parents have fewer fights about which teacher is better. It wants to make it so the teachers can focus more on classroom management and less on curriculum design, and makes it so the parents maybe pay less because the more teacher hours are going to something else, and it saves taxpayers money. But I asked this question earlier. Which group of people haven't I mentioned? It's students. They don't benefit from this. We all collectively know they don't benefit from this. They know they don't benefit from this. Why is it that when I present them a project alternative to a paper test, they all take the project? Why is it that when I have to teach another teacher's stuff, not only do I suck at teaching it because I don't know why they made it, it doesn't meet the needs of my kids or the way that I teach in my classroom? Everybody is different. Every teacher is different. Every student is different. Every parent is different. Every district is different. And I am a supporter of choice and freedom. I think that makes sense because I not only support equality, I fight for equity. And that's what we don't have. Canned curriculum and standardized tests is an affront to equity nationwide. That's the quiet part. It's putting kids second and parents and teachers and schools first, saving money to put the kids in a worse spot. That's disappointing. And that's the quiet part that no one is saying loudly. Except for me. Peace.